The Edmonton Oilers once again came agonizingly close to beating the Florida Panthers, all on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. First ever 12-team field. You don't want to miss a moment of the action. The College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, begins with 4 first-round games starting this weekend, December 20th and 21st, on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. On today's show, so close, once again, just that close to beating the Florida Panthers. Then tackling the underlyings, the game itself, the numbers, what it says about how the game was played out. And then the big picture. We'll talk about the game within the context of what this means for the Oilers season at large. So, one game does not define a season. One regular season game against a non-conference opponent in December on a Monday night does not define a season. But if you are an Oilers fan listening to this episode right now, me sitting here right now, you can't help but feel like this is a sign. And I try not to be superstitious. I try not to be irrational, but then again, I'm a sports fan, and you kind of have to lean into the supernatural. You have to believe in superstitions because so much of all of this is out of our controls as individuals. They have to go out there and play the games. And the Oilers played such a good game for about 35 minutes. When they went up 4-2 on the Draisaitl power play goal, they were moving. They looked really good. They had control of the game. They had scored multiple goals. They scored 3 straight goals at that point when Draisaitl made it 4-2 on the power play. And you felt like you were in good shape. You felt like you had enough of a handle on the game that you would be able to limp to the end. And I don't want to get on Stuart Skinner too much because he made quite a few really good saves in this game. But that third period, that's the moment where if you are a pessimist, if you are somebody who is not a believer in this roster construction, that's your evidence. You know, if we were in court, that's what you would admit as evidence because that's everything that goes wrong when your roster is set up like this. When your defensemen, who have been really good for 3 weeks now, make those types of mistakes. When a really good player, and don't get me wrong, Sam Reinhart is a tremendous hockey player. You know, he's going to represent Team Canada at the Four Nations, had 50-something goals last year. He's a really quality player. And I know from the way Stuart Skinner reacted when that puck ricocheted off his helmet and went in the net behind him, he wanted to climb into a hole and be invisible because he knows that's one he needs to have. And look, there are maybe 5 players, 10 players in the entire world that are going to be able to bank that puck in off the back of his head into the net. I don't feel that I want to get on Skinner too much in this game because a lot of the mistakes from the Oilers' perspective weren't really his doing. You know, a lot of these Florida goals, they happen in build-up play where there's a mistake. You know, the Boquist goal, the shorty that opens the scoring in this game. Evan Bouchard just slips. He's not under pressure. The pass he's given is more than adequate where it shouldn't handcuff him. He loses his footing. The Panthers go the other way and score. You know, the Tkachuk goal that makes it 2-1, that's a net front play. You got to have a stick on him. You got to have a body on him, try and tie him up, prevent him from being able to make that play. But instead, it doesn't happen. And look, I really try not to make these games more than they need to be, especially this early in the season. It's one game. They'd won 8 of their last 9 coming into tonight. They'd won 4 in a row against good opponents, and I was feeling reasonably good. And they played really well tonight. And that's really the thing that sucks about losing is you don't want to feel good about losing. This is professional sports. To quote Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. But you played really well in this game against a really good opponent. And I know Florida's record isn't outstanding right now. I know the NHL at large is kind of in a weird place where nobody's really playing all of that well. But I think anybody would be foolish to say Florida was incapable of doing this again, because frankly, even without Barkov tonight, they looked really good. And the first 10, 15 minutes of this game, it felt very much like the meat of the Stanley Cup final, in that there wasn't a lot of space. The Oilers kept trying to get going off the rush, and those opportunities weren't there. And Florida was more than content to say, okay, skate into us. Take your shots from the point. We'll give you those. We'll give you those. No problem. And for a little while there, I was worried that Edmonton wasn't going to get to the nitty gritty. They weren't going to work for their offense. And of the 5 goals the Oilers scored in this game, 3 of them come off of the rush. Both Hyman goals are off of the rush. And then both Hyman goals are off of the rush, and the Connor Brown goal is off of the rush. The Draisaitl goal, he was stationary. That was a one-timer power play. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. But the Kapanen goal is a jam play. That was not a rush play either. But the Oilers, when they can't get the rush going, it shows their limitations. And it's hard to build a well-rounded roster in the NHL in terms of style, because the best players are all the best at the same thing for the most part. You know, what makes McDavid so elite is his transition play, his ability to make anything a one-play touchdown, for lack of a better word. He can do things to create offense for everybody else. You know, it's the same thing for Florida with Tkachuk, with Reinhart, where those are guys where if they have the puck on their stick, they have the ability to take the game into their own hands and control it. And you saw the limitations of the Oilers roster construction tonight, in that their defense made some really difficult mistakes, and it's good players who made mistakes, which some of that is just, you know, you can't be perfect all the time, law of averages, but I don't think it's a coincidence that it was Florida that ended the win streak. I think Florida, by design, the way they play, it gives a lot of highly skilled teams a really hard time, because there's not nearly as much room. They are physical, they are annoying, they are fundamentally frustrating to play against, where they will wait you out. Florida will cycle the puck in your zone for 45 seconds to a minute and a half before even taking a shot, just to annoy you, just to tire you out, just to wear you down. And I think the Oilers got into that trap a little bit early on in the game. And then once that first Hyman goal happens, they're in the game. Their feet are under them. They start to get that momentum going, and Hyman's able to score again. You get the Kapanen goal, you get the Draisaitl goal. This was a winnable hockey game. And you don't want to feel good coming off of a loss, because this is pro sports and losing should never feel good. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Fundamentally, losing should not feel good in sports. But with all of that said, they played pretty well tonight, and 5 goals most nights is going to win you a game in the National in 2024, even with the bad defense and even with bad goaltending. I wanted more from the Oilers defense and from Stuart Skinner tonight, but this is how the game unfolded. There's only so much you can do sitting at home watching, or if you're at the game, there's only so much you can do. I felt they had every chance to win this game, but they weren't able to capitalize on it. Very reminiscent of some of those games in the Cup final where they had their chances, but if they don't go in, they stay chances and they become things you dwell on. You know, Hyman had 2 golden opportunities to tie this game in the third period. He had the breakaway that Bobrovsky robbed him on, and then he had the one time. I would say it was more of a touch pass than a one-timer with the 6-on-5 scenario where the net was open and he just missed the net. You know, Hyman had 2 really good looks in this game, and we very well might be recording this. I might only be starting the cold open right now because the game might have gone to overtime if either of those Hyman chances went in. But we're going to take our first break of today's show. We come back, we're going to dive into the underlying numbers, possession, try and get a handle on how this game unfolded. Coming up next on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Today's episode is sponsored by Bilt Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Bilt, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Bilt points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in the program, possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Bilt members. I love using Bilt points for travel, and Bilt makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnhl. So make sure to use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Today's show is also brought to you by SelectQuote, the World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. Teamwork can protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. You invest so much time to take care of yourself and be the healthiest, best version of you. SelectQuote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance policy for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. If this episode seems a little choppier than usual, that's me editing around my sneezes. I have been having the worst allergies all day today, and if that impacts your listening experience, I am sorry, but I'm going to do my best to hold them in. As for this game, you felt like this was doable, and you don't think you're going to win every game. The season is too long. There's too much variance, but at 4-2 in the second, you feel like you have a chance here. At 4-2 in the second, you feel that you need to be able to salt this game away. But unfortunately for the Oilers, they weren't able to find that mystery goal. They weren't able to find that kind of silver bullet that they needed to put this. Florida's a good hockey team. Like, I want to emphasize that Florida is a really gifted hockey team. And like, I'm looking back at the Forsling goal, and you probably can't have that. You probably can't have the Mikkola goal. You probably can't have the Reinhart goal. You know, if you are going to win this game, if you're the Oilers, you can't have those goals kill you tonight, because none of those are particularly good looks. You know, if you want to give Reinhart the benefit of the doubt that he's that good of a shooter, that he can aim that precisely and knock the back of Skinner's head, I'll give you that. Fine. The Forsling and the Mikkola goals can't happen. And those are not just on Stuart Skinner. Those are on the players on the ice in the lead up to that play. I forget which one of those goals, but a few of the Oilers were too busy in the neutral zone arguing that Jeff Skinner had gotten cross-checked in the build-up to that goal as opposed to coming off the ice for line changes. And because of that, ultimately the puck ends up in the back of the net. But look, you played well enough to win this game. The shots on goal, 30-28, the scoring chances. Florida won the scoring chances. Edmonton won the shots on goal, which tells you that Florida had a bit more possession. You know, to have 28 shots on goal and then 42 scoring chances, a 14 differential. That means that the Panthers either missed the net 14 times, missed the net, had their shot blocked, or some combination of those two 14 times, which tells you they had the puck in the Oilers' end a little bit more than the Oilers had the puck down in the Florida end. What stings if you're an Oilers fan is that the Oilers had a lot of good looks in this game. They had 70% of the high danger chances, 69.7 something when you round up to 70. And in a game where you have that much quality, where you're actually able to get the puck on Bobrovsky, to put heat on him, to pressure, to play defense, it stings, because when you play this well against most teams, if not all teams, it's over. You think about the difference in this game against Florida versus the Vegas game and the Minnesota game, where Edmonton scored and scored and scored and scored and scored, and the other team never really mounted a comeback. But Florida, to their credit, they have the DNA. They have that dog, for lack of a better expression. I hate to reduce this to, morning sports talk radio, but they have that innate championship pedigree. They have that sense of, we're never out of this, and we get one. We make this back to a 1-goal game, we are right back in this. The Oilers special teams, they had a power play goal. They conceded a shorty, which, you never want to do that, but you conceded a shorty. You conceded the Matthew Tkachuk goal, which is a power play goal, but it didn't feel like this was a game where the Oilers were outclassed. It didn't feel like a game where they didn't have a chance. This game was sitting there waiting for either team to seize control. And we had a little bit of a seesaw there where Edmonton scored 3 in a row, Florida scored 3 in a row. We're sitting there, tie game, 5-all. And then the backbreaker, that Carter Verhaeghe goal is a real backbreaker late in the third. And you have enough time. That goal happens at about the 6 minutes to go mark. And how they manage their star players down the backstretch of a game where they're trailing. But you go back and look. I'm looking at the Verhaeghe goal right now. Ekholm and Bouchard are on the ice. Ekholm is looking away from the puck. He has his back to the play. Ekholm is directly in front of the net. Bouchard is looking away from the play. McDavid gets over late. Kapanen is slow coming back. And Verhaeghe gets the puck on the line of the left circle. He's probably about 15 feet from the net front. And Skinner doesn't really have a chance here. A player of Verhaeghe's caliber from that close to the net, with an unclear shooting lane for Skinner to see, and without a defensive player pressuring Verhaeghe, even you listening to this, if you have played any level of competitive hockey, or if you've ever shot a ball around in a driveway at a net, if you're 10 feet away and the goalie has to pick, am I going up? Am I going down? Pick a corner. And Carter Verhaeghe is a world-class hockey player. I think I had Verhaeghe in the 70s when I did my top 100 players before the season started. This is a world-class goal scorer. And if you give a guy like that room, he's going to hurt you. And for the Oilers, it was the details tonight. If the Oilers had the details, they win this game, because almost all of these Florida goals are direct byproducts of mistakes, of failed exits, of bad defensive positioning, of guys not passing people off to other line mates, or in the case of the first goal, the Boquist goal, Bouchard slipped. And I don't know if you know this, Locked On Oilers listeners, but ice is slippery, and on occasion you will slip if you're not on your balance. But we're going to take one more break on today's show. We'll try and extrapolate this loss out a little bit more into the big picture coming up next. So be sure to stick around. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. In the NFL this week, Thursday Night Football is not bad. Broncos-Chargers, that's a game that matters. Both those teams headed towards the playoffs. That's important for seeding. The Broncos, 3-point road underdogs heading to the Chargers. Another good AFC North game this week, Steelers-Ravens. The Steelers heading down to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, who are 6.5-point favorites. And then next Monday night, sneaky fun game. The Saints heading up to Green Bay to take on the Packers. The Saints season already over. Green Bay trying to survive in the NFC playoff picture. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who's hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are powering through a difficult loss. And I am powering through my allergies, like I said at the top of the second segment. So if you're watching on YouTube and you see me making all kinds of bugged out facial expressions because I'm trying to hold in sneezes so they can pass till I can get through my point, so it's a little bit easier to edit. We're trying our best here, but it is rough when you have an allergy attack, when you have to talk for prolonged periods of time. All right, enough kvetching. The Oilers are close. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. You don't need a podcast. You don't need a Patreon subscription. You don't need data analytics to know they're close. They have played really good hockey for close to a month now. They have shown the ability to play a few different types of games. They've won some low-scoring ones. They've won some high-scoring ones. They've lost some high-scoring ones. They've lost some low-scoring ones. They have played really well against Minnesota and Vegas. They played well against Vegas both times, even though they lost the second most recent time. But this one has a different tenor to it. A regular season game the year after is never going to atone, make amends, balance the ledgers for losing a Game 7 of a Cup final. There is nothing you could do. Like, even if the Oilers go on to win the Stanley Cup this year, which is very much on the table, that will not make last year feel better. Sure, you can contextualize it more and say, well, they had to learn how to win. Part of learning how to win is losing. You lose. Loss makes you put things in perspective and makes you appreciate the grind and make you better. And all of that is true. It's very obvious that in professional sports, you need those tough experiences to learn from. That part of your development as a player is refining your character so that regardless of the situation you're in, you're adequately prepared to use your talent. It is one thing to be talented. It is another thing to have the acuity and the perseverance to be able to apply it in a variety of different situations. And all of that is true. But you still have obvious things to work on here. You, as a team, are asking a lot of a handful of guys. And look, their stars delivered tonight. You got 2 from Hyman. You got a Draisaitl goal. McDavid had a couple apples. You needed your defense. You needed Skinner tonight to be the accentuation, because when your guys give you 5, you expect to win that hockey game. And when you lose a game where you score 5 goals, that tells me your defense didn't do a great job. That tells me your goaltending didn't do a great job. And the Oilers are not asking the world of those guys to be able to give up 4 goals. That's a reasonable margin for error. It's not like the Oilers lost a 3-1 game where they conceded an empty netter to make the score ugly and the big guys couldn't get anything going. The Oilers had tons of chances in this game on offense, and they couldn't convert enough of them. And it sounds crazy to say in a game where they scored 5 goals that they probably should have scored 7 or 8, but the chances they had at the net front, the high volume of high danger chances, the jam plays, the missed nets, it's really agonizing when the margins are that small. And that's what I want to impart on you before we wrap up today's show. The margins in this league between winning and losing a given game are very small. And then we talk about that in the context of a playoff series where it's 7 games over 2 weeks, and each of those games has a very small margin of error. And you start stacking that up game after game after game after game. And the margins don't seem big. If you do the series at large, you compare goals and scoring chances, expected goals, high danger chances. You compare all of that on a series-wide basis. It most of the time, if it goes 6 or 7 games, the ledger's going to be pretty close. You're going to get 1 or 2 goal differentials deciding playoff series, deciding who wins a Stanley Cup, because that's the way high variance factors work. There's just so much that goes into a given game that it's hard to get hung up on one individual sequence. And sure, you can nitpick on a lot of these plays for both perspectives. Florida didn't have a great game tonight. Florida doesn't want to concede off the rush. The fact that they gave up those 3 rush goals They gave up the Draisaitl power play goal. That the Florida would tell you they didn't play well. Paul Maurice would tell you we got lucky tonight. We did not play our best game. Edmonton gave us a few favors. We capitalized on them. It's unfortunate for the Oilers that this team in particular, Florida, seems to have their number to some degree, but it's rooted in the style. When they make the Oilers work and work and work, the Oilers are away from their game. When the Oilers are not playing up and down tempo, transition game, they are not comfortable. And as good as Connor Brown, Henrique, Janmark, etc. have been, those are not guys who I would depend on. And right now, when you're playing a game like this against a team this good, or you're playing a playoff series against a really good team, which the Oilers are going to do at some point, you need everything to line up for you. And to get your best case scenario is part of what goes into winning a championship. You need everything to line up simultaneously. You know, we talked about McDavid, Draisaitl, special teams, defense, goaltending, depth scoring. You had McDavid and Draisaitl tonight. The special teams weren't great. You know, your power play conceded a shorthanded goal against. That's not great. Your penalty kill conceded one goal against. But that's a wash, we'll say. Your defense was pretty mediocre. Your goaltending was bad. I don't like getting on Skinner because I know he's being asked to do an awful lot, but at the same time, he is a professional athlete, and he does need to be able to make one of those saves on one of those three goals, whether it's the Forsling, the Mikkola, or the Reinhardt. He does need to save one of those goals, and maybe we're having a different conversation about this game. And the depth scoring, you know, you got a Kapanen goal. The depth wasn't the reason you lost tonight. Your big guys were on the ice for a lot of the goals against. But that will just about do it for this allergy-induced edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, throw the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We're making our way. 2,000 followers by the end of the regular season is the goal. Hopefully we can get there and then shoot for something crazy during the playoffs. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.